Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation, what is sensorality? Alright, we finished up last time with, what is the base of physics? Physics is. How does censorship affect efficiency? Sensorality is our specific solution. It is kind of this S and C unit with N and OR, and we're showing this direct iteration of the letters. But we're relating the syllability, the letters of sensorality, back to efficiency. It's kind of like our major axiom, so to speak. But again, we've even generalized past axiomatization. That's where you derive physics from. And now we're showing this internal completeness of the language itself. Sorting is sifting, right? We had the what is if to or, what is or to if. We derived that last episode. Sensorality is siftality. Chaos is disorienting. Dissensorality is disorientality. Sensorality is disturbing. Disturbing, distributing. Distribute, tribute. Another one of these dichotomistic pairs that, again, language is literal, that you probably haven't thought of. Again, we don't point them out that much unless it's clearly even on a personal level, but oh, I didn't really realize that, or I don't think other people will realize. But right, tribute is a tax. Distribution is the opposite of tax, right? If you distribute, right, not like sorting, sending things out, but like tribute and you're not tribute, that's not tax, right? A tribute is a tax. And so if you read history, that's very apparent in the diction, but distribution is not tax. And it's kind of again, a natural definition, but in the negative form. And again, sometimes, I'll typically put negative or non-existent theorems. Like if we're proving something doesn't exist or proving something wrong, I'll put it in red, as I'm sure you've seen on the screen. But again, the order, right? I'm not picking if you can take one statement that can either be said the same thing with a double negative or just with base words that don't have negation in them. I'm just writing them down as it is presented, as I derive it, and as it comes to me. Dissension is disagreement. Dissensuality is the opposite of consensuality. Again, explicitly pointing out consensual, sensual, and then consent, that S to the T last episode. And so the opposite of consensual is dissensual. What is the relationship of thought and memory? And so now we're at this big point, which is actually kind of hilarious if you look back or when you see my derivations. Again, if scientific discovery is ever acknowledged, you'll see I come at Sean Carroll, and I keep saying, because he has this edgy little website, I can't recommend it enough, The Preposterous Universe. He has this little blog post, which is the edgiest thing I've ever read. It's something about you think you're a lone genius, or you think you're smarter than Galileo or something. But regardless, I was on his website, and he had this thing, or I don't know if he had a quote in truth only the void and an atom or something. But regardless, he has these quotes on his website where I thought there was his derivation or his science. And it's just people from history. And so we are at this point of ought versus is. And so it turns out that's David Hume, not Sean Carroll. And the void and in truth there's only void and atoms is I don't know if I think that might actually be Galileo or something. But for the longest time, I'm coming at Sean Carroll these are statements he made, which again, Sean Carroll's going to prison for being a fucking criminal. But it was actually hilarious, oh, he didn't even derive these things. Then I realized, oh yeah, none of these people have derived anything. And certainly not with the proof of centralization, it is what it is being the form of all solutions. But regardless, right, what is the relationship of thought and memory? And then David Hume says, deriving or ought from is impossible. Correct. Existence is. And so what ought to be is what ought is good. And so you have a system, you have people that exist, and then, because David Hume is a philosopher, but he's writing in the context of morality. But you have two people, right, and they exist, and they're both doing the same thing, and one person has a shitty life and the other person gets treated with respect, the laws apply to them. That person's life's not perfect, but his life is more fair. So then you can look at the other person and say, his life ought to be like that. But ought is always towards good, and good emerges from inefficiency. two people that do the same exact thing don't get the same outcome, right? Life's not fair. Another way of saying life's inefficient. But the concept, the morality of ought, emerges from is. So correct, David Hume, you can't derive is from ought, because is like the foundation, it's the base. Everything, it's like emerges, all verbs emerge from is. And so, but you can derive ought from thought, very trivially, obviously. But it did arise. I mean, that's kind of what the lead in. What is the relationship of thought and memory, right? Is thinking, what is the relationship, right? If you memorize something, in the words that come to crystalline knowledge, facts that you've sit there, rote memorization, repetition, things that you've recited or you've built a memory palace, all kind of terminology you'll hear. But thinking, again, right, thinking is a physical resistance. You're trying to work through inefficiency, work through things that are not clear to you. Me talking out loud to my camera, trying to figure out what sensorality is, anybody talking to themselves, so on and so forth. But thinking is this process of trying to sort through resistance. It physically is resistance, and it's just in the same way your light burning is an electron moving through a coil, and that inefficiency is radiated. Thinking is like resistance, and the same exact thing. We've covered that, we've derived that. But ought is to good is neutral. It just establishes existence. And so conceptually, thought to memory, right? If you memorize something, you're thinking about it more, but thought is a process, memory is not, but memorizing is a process. I don't know, again, posing a question to draw your intuition, and then historically, you can derive ought from thought, obviously. Sensors are physical. Existence is physical. See a lot, again, when people don't, all mathematics is emergent from physical systems, and so everything is a physical thing. Mass is physical. Existence is physical. Energy, vibration, all of these properties, well, vibration is well defined as a process, as a cycle without vibration or without work being done. Energy, again, energy is not physically located anywhere. You have that intuition. The word exists because that property is internalized and it is related to mass. You turn your phone on vibrate and it vibrates enough and it'll start to move. Vibration is the base of movement, and movement is maximized, the efficiency of movement is maximized by rhythm. And so thinking is like trying to establish rhythm, or again, just posing the question to have the intuition present. Existence is physical. And then we have, again, physical, linguistically, very clearly close to rhythm, right? That HY. Physics, rhythm, and then as well system, right? Because of this fundamental numeric stability of two, every system contains more than one component. What is to it? What is to it? Again, just some fundamental logic. Can something be counterintuitive? Right? There are no fundamental paradoxes. All inconsistency is you not making sense of the world. There's nothing confusing. The rocks aren't trying to confuse you. The quasars aren't trying to confuse you. So just people say, that's counterintuitive. Quantum mechanics is counterintuitive. Can anything be counterintuitive? Intuition comes from experience. You interact with the world, that is where your intuition comes from. Your intuition can be wrong. You can think, this exists, therefore, conclusion, and that just be straight up just wrong. I've done it, you've done it, everyone's been wrong, nobody's perfect, blah, blah, blah. But because there's no natural inconsistencies or paradoxes, counterintuitive, and again, the hyphen is like a big linguistic thingamabob, but I want to say counterintuitive doesn't exist, and it's, again, some sort of logical band-aid, linguistic band-aid, calling something counterintuitive. And see, our visiting scholar Gus also agrees. An excitation is a pop. Momentum pops. To snap is to break. What is a snap to a slap? Right, and then elemento, right, so it's in that little chunk of rhythm. We're almost done, so we're going to keep going. But, right, snap is this word you'll use. Someone says, I'm again 32, but people used to say, oh, snap. Or if somebody claps back, they might say snap back. Or if you have a hat, right, this is not a snap back, but, right, a click, what is a click to a snap? Right, so we have a snap back, and then something clicks, Just all of these different fundamental verbs that we've derived. And then, if someone has a good bar in a rap song, they might say he snapped. So like, what are all of these fundamental verbs that we've derived? To slap is to hit. To hit is to punch. What is punching to popping? Right? If somebody says they punched through a barrier, or if if you puncture something, you punch it. And so, for whatever reason, again, all of these fundamental verbs started popping up. A punch, right? Push or pull. A punch is a push. A pull is a tug. All right. Again, we've now arrived at that fundamental differentiation: a push or a pull. And so again, we're differentiating. We're making our language more specific. Push away, pull towards. Soaring is ripping. Objects are physical. Serendipity is whimsical. Systems are physical. Whimsicality is fun. Sensorality is loserality, right? This is a fun one, but again, it connects linguistically the words, right? If you're a loser, right, what are you? You're not a winner. But sensorality is loser, generalized-ality. And then we've derived serality again. So again, we're trying to form or bounding this concept of sensorality linguistically. That is what I have for you tonight. Thank you for watching. My rights continue to be violated. It is literally illegal, and I will see you on the next one.